President Trump carried out the strike against Iranian military leader Qasem Soleimani without informing, much less consulting, his European allies. Some governments acknowledged the killing as at least not a bad thing, though at the European Union level, the emphasis was squarely on a de-escalation by all sides. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen didn't issue any reaction for 3 days. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo later complained on Fox News.
Frankly, the Europeans haven't been as helpful as I wish that they could be. The Brits, the French, the Germans all need to understand that what we did, what the Americans did, saved lives in Europe as well. Qasem Soleimani led, and his IRGC led assassination campaigns in Europe. This was a good thing for the entire world, and we're urging everyone in the world to get behind what the United States is trying to do, to get the Islamic Republic of Iran to simply behave like a normal nation.
Iran's reaction to the Soleimani killing was to announce it would breach the final limitation it was observing in the tattered nuclear agreement Europe is still trying to save. Then it bombed U.S. bases in Iraq. This made the situation even more dangerous and diplomatically complex to navigate, and the EU's new top leaders seemed to be floundering. Commission President von der Leyen called an urgent cabinet meeting, and Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell summoned foreign ministers to Brussels. But their statements were bland, emphasizing the importance of talking to Iran, whose actions they did not explicitly condemn.
The use of weapons must stop now to give space to dialogue. We all are called upon to do everything possible to rekindle talks, and there cannot be enough of that.
The latest rocket attack on air bases in Iraq, used by U.S. and the coalition forces, among them European forces, are yet another example of escalation and increased confrontation. It is in no one's interest to turn up the spiral of violence even further.
NATO also called an urgent session of ambassadors after the Soleimani strike, which caused it to suspend a 500-person non-combat training program in Iraq. In contrast with the EU, having the U.S. as its largest ally and no formal ties to Tehran, NATO has no need for neutrality. Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg.
This is a U.S. decision. It is not a decision taken by neither the global coalition nor NATO, but all allies are concerned about Iran's destabilizing activities in the region, Iran's support to different terrorist groups, and of course we are extremely concerned about the recent attacks we have seen against civilian energy infrastructure in Saudi Arabia, or against coalition bases in Iraq, bases which are important for our efforts to fight international terrorism in Iraq and in Syria.
Terrorism analyst Olivier Guitta, a geopolitical risk consultant at London-based firm Global Strat, thinks Europe is being short-sighted in not providing stronger support for Washington's efforts to contain Iran. Guitta believes Iran's missile strike on U.S. bases, which caused no casualties, is mild compared to things to come.
It will go back to their main tool in terms of pressure and foreign policy in the past 40 years, which is terrorism. So they would use proxy to pull off some attacks against U.S. interests and possibly in Europe. So we could see a redux of the campaign we saw in France in 85, 86. Terrorism carried out by Hezbollah on the orders of Tehran. That's what the main European security services are looking at in terms of scenario, and that's at the top of their threat. I mean, even more so than Islamic State and Al-Qaeda in terms of potential attacks in the next 6 months.
President Trump intends to get reluctant European governments more engaged in his priorities in the Middle East one way or another. In a Wednesday night address, he told Europeans they need to quit the Iran nuclear deal, from which the U.S. already withdrew, and then he said this.
Today, I am going to ask NATO to become much more involved in the Middle East process.
Trump immediately called NATO Chief Stoltenberg to convey the request personally. And, according to an alliance spokesman, Stoltenberg agreed NATO could contribute more to regional stability and the fight against international terrorism. It's not yet clear what that pledge is going to entail. Terry Schultz, DW, Brussels.